My son-in-law dropped off his 2 daughters at my house, assuring me he'd be back in just a few hours. He never returned, leaving a wake of betrayal. 8 years down the line, he filed a lawsuit against me for abducting his own children, demanding that justice be served. But as I passed a sealed envelope to the judge, she looked at me and asked, "Are they aware of what's in here?" I answered, "Not yet." That singular truth would alter the course of everything. The garden shears slipped from my grasp, falling with a soft thud onto the rich soil of the flower bed. It was a different sound, the crunch of gravel under the tires of an unfamiliar car, that caused every muscle in my body to tighten. I checked the small watch on my wrist. 4:30. The girls had cheerleading practice and wouldn't be home for at least another hour. Through the slightly grimy kitchen window, I saw a sleek black sedan roll up the long driveway, emerging from behind the weeping willows that stood like sentinels. The car moved with a slow, deliberate pace, as if its driver was carefully surveying the property I'd called home for 40 years. My farm is nestled about 5 miles from the nearest town, a quiet seclusion where unexpected guests are an anomaly. I pushed myself up from the rose bushes I'd been tending, my knees aching in protest after being bent for so long. The sedan came to a halt by the front porch, its engine making soft ticking sounds as it cooled. A fine layer of dust from the drive settled around it like a shroud of uncertainty. The driver's side door swung open, and a man emerged. My breath hitched. Even after 8 years, even from this distance, I knew that outline. He was leaner now, his features sharper, but it was him. Mark Peterson, or Mark Miller as he had been known, my daughter's widower. The man who had discarded my granddaughters, as if they were last week's news. He had transformed. His sandy brown hair was cut shorter, styled in a severe way that seemed foreign to him. He was dressed in a sharp navy blazer and tailored trousers, clothes that looked costly, as though he was trying to cast an illusion of success and respectability. Yet, I could see the restless energy in his every motion, the way his fingers nervously tapped against the key fob in his hand. Dark smudges circled his eyes, visible even from where I stood. He appeared older than his 44 years, eroded by the life he had embraced over the one he had with his children. I stepped out from behind the vibrant azaleas, the shears still clutched in my right hand. My gardening clogs crunched on the gravel path as I walked toward the house, placing myself squarely between Mark and my front door. He hadn't noticed me yet. His gaze was fixed on the windows, as if searching for a sign of the girls he had left behind so long ago. "Mark." My voice traveled across the yard, steady and devoid of warmth. He spun around, and for a fleeting second, a look of genuine shock crossed his face. He quickly regained his composure, raising his chin with a manufactured confidence that I knew was a facade. His smile was well-rehearsed, empty. "Hello, Eleanor. You're looking well." He took a hesitant step forward, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. I remained firmly planted near the porch steps, my grip on the shears tightening until my knuckles were white. "What do you want here?" "I've come for my daughters." The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. For 8 long years, Chloe and Sophie had been my girls, my life, my family. I had nurtured them from frightened children into bright, strong young women. I taught them how to bake my mother's apple pie, helped them with their science projects, and held them close when nightmares made them cry out for the parents who were no longer there to offer comfort. "Your daughters?" My voice escalated, despite my desperate attempt to remain calm. "You forfeited the right to call them that the day you drove away, and never looked back." Mark's practiced composure began to fray. "I was unwell, Eleanor. I needed time to get better." 8 years? I strode forward, my 5'8" frame, casting a long shadow over him in the afternoon sun. 8 years to heal from what, exactly? From the responsibility of being their father? He flinched, but stood his ground. "You have no idea what I endured after Amelia passed away." "Grief?" "I understand grief more than you know." My words were sharp and precise. "I understand that 2 little girls were desperate for their father, and he chose to run instead of staying to fight for them. I'm fighting for them now." Mark's voice took on a harder edge, a sliver of steel emerging from beneath his anxious exterior. "I'm their father, Eleanor. I am their legal guardian, and I want them back. The menace in his tone was undeniable. This was not a plea. It was a declaration of war. Get off my property. I raised the shears slightly, not as a weapon, but for emphasis. Those girls have a home here. They have stability. They don't need you coming back to turn their lives upside down again. Mark's cold smile returned. We'll just see about that. He turned on his heel and walked back to his car with a measured, confident stride. This isn't over, Eleanor. Not by a long shot. The black sedan reversed down the driveway, vanishing behind the willows as quickly as it had appeared. I was left standing alone in my yard, the shears trembling in my hand, my gaze fixed on the settling dust where his car had been. The familiar tranquility of the countryside returned, with birds chirping in the distance and a gentle breeze whispering through the fields of corn. But the peace I had painstakingly built over 8 years had been shattered. Mark was back, and he was after my girls. My legs felt weak as I walked toward the kitchen door. This was far from over. Inside the familiar comfort of my kitchen, my body went through the motions while my mind was a whirlwind. I filled the kettle with water, scooped tea leaves into the infuser, and set it on the stove to boil. These were automatic actions, performed by hands that still quivered from the confrontation. The comforting ritual did little to quell the tempest raging in my chest. 8 years. 8 years since he had disappeared without a trace, leaving me to mend 2 shattered young hearts. Steam curled up from my mug as I sat at the sturdy oak table where my family had shared countless meals. A photograph of Amelia smiled out at me from the refrigerator. My beautiful girl in her graduation gown, so vibrant and full of promise, never imagining what was to come, what the cancer would ultimately take from us all. The tea was hot, and I drank it, letting the warmth ground me. The late afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains my husband had helped me hang 30 years ago, casting a golden glow over everything. This kitchen was a witness to so much joy, and just as much sorrow. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to drift back to Amelia's final days in the spring of 2017, when the last glimmer of hope had faded in that cold, sterile hospital room. My daughter, my brave, brilliant girl, who could light up a room with her laugh, had been reduced to a fragile whisper beneath crisp white sheets. Mark had been present for every visit, holding her hand as the machines around them hummed their relentless rhythm. He would talk to her for hours, recounting the girls' latest antics, painting vivid pictures of the future they had so carefully planned. Even as Amelia's body weakened, he seemed to cling to the belief that she would recover. I can't raise them without her, Eleanor, he had confessed to me one evening in the hospital hallway, his face streaked with tears. I don't know how to be a father on my own. I should have recognized the warning signs then, the way he would recoil when Chloe hugged him, as if her touch was a painful reminder. The way he'd watch Sophie sleep and suddenly break down in tears. The girls were a living reflection of Amelia. They had her dark, curly hair, her determined chin, the same infectious laugh. After the funeral, Mark's grief became an all-consuming void. He would sit in Amelia's favorite armchair for hours, his gaze lost and empty. The girls would try to show him their drawings or ask for help with their schoolwork, but he would look straight through them as if they weren't there. Grandma, a 7-year-old Chloe had asked me one day, why doesn't Daddy see us anymore? I began spending more and more time at their house, taking over meals and bedtime stories. Mark would vanish for hours on end, driving aimlessly through the countryside or sitting by Amelia's grave. When he would return, his breath often carried the scent of whiskey. The girls started coming to my farm more frequently. It began with afternoons, which turned into overnight stays, and then entire weekends. Mark never protested. In fact, he seemed relieved to have them out of his sight. I understood his agony. Heaven knows I felt it myself. The gaping hole left when the cancer stole my child. But my understanding didn't excuse his neglect. Those children needed their father, not another ghost haunting their home. I tried everything. Amelia had whispered to me during one of her last lucid moments. Promise me you'll look after them, Mom. All of them. Mark, too, if you can manage it. I had made that promise through a veil of tears, never foreseeing how utterly impossible it would be to keep. How can you care for someone who refuses to be saved? The The tea in my mug had grown cold. I looked at Amelia's photo, at her youthful face brimming with life. She had fought the cancer with every fiber of her being, never surrendering, never fleeing from the pain. Her husband had chosen a different path. I set down the mug and rubbed my weary eyes. The next day would bring a new battle. Mark had made that much clear. But for tonight, I needed to hold on to the reasons I had fought so hard to give Chloe and Sophie the stability their father could not. The sound of gravel in the driveway stirred me from my thoughts. The girls were home from practice, their voices floating through the screen door as they debated some trivial matter. The normal sounds of a normal evening, in a house where children felt cherished and secure. I pushed away from the table, leaving Amelia's photo to watch over the kitchen where her daughters would soon be having their dinner. Some promises are worth keeping, no matter the sacrifice. Amelia's face in that picture blurred as my eyes filled with tears I refused to let fall. The promise I made to her to protect her family. All of them had been challenged in ways I could never have foreseen. But one night stands out in my memory, seared there like a permanent scar. The night that set everything in motion. 2 years after Amelia's passing, just as the girls were beginning to find their footing in their new reality, Mark made his final decision. It was well past 2 in the morning when the sound of car doors slamming shattered the night's silence. I had dozed off in my recliner, the late-night news playing silently on the television. The abrupt noise startled me awake, and a sense of dread washed over me. Peering through the front window, I saw Mark's old sedan parked haphazardly as he stumbled towards my porch. Even in the dim light, his unsteady walk told me everything I needed to know. He was drunk, or perhaps something more. I met him on the porch before he could reach the door, behind which my granddaughters were sleeping peacefully. The acrid smell of cheap liquor, mingled with something sharper and chemical, hit me first. His clothes were creased as if he'd been sleeping in them, and his eyes had a wild, desperate glint I had never seen before. "Mark, what are you doing here?" I kept my voice down, mindful of the sleeping children upstairs. "I need to see my girls." He tried to shoulder past me, but I stood my ground, blocking his way. "They're my children, Eleanor. You can't keep them from me." "At 2 o'clock in the morning in this state?" I gestured towards his disheveled appearance. "They're asleep. They're safe. Leave them be." But our hushed, tense voices had already drifted upstairs. I heard the soft padding of small feet on the hardwood floor above. A moment later, Chloe appeared at the top of the stairs, her 7-year-old face etched with confusion. Behind her, little Sophie rubbed her eyes, tightly clutching a stuffed bunny. "Grandma, what's going on?" Chloe's voice was barely a whisper. Mark looked up at his daughters, his babies, and something in his expression shifted. It wasn't softness, but something colder, like a door slamming shut. "Daddy," Sophie called out, a thread of hope in her sleepy voice. Instead of replying, Mark turned his back on them. "I can't," he muttered to me, his words slurring. "Look at them, Eleanor. They have her eyes, her smile. Every time I see them, it's like I'm seeing everything I've lost all over again." The girls cautiously descended a few more steps, drawn by their father's voice, but huddled close together. Chloe's arm wrapped protectively around her younger sister's shoulders. The gesture broke my heart. No 7-year-old should ever have to be a protector. "Mark," I tried again, my voice softer now. "The children need you. They miss you." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Need me? Look at them, Eleanor. Take a good look. They're afraid of me, their own father, and they're cowering behind you like I'm some kind of monster." I glanced back at the girls, and my spirit sank. He was right. Silent tears were streaming down Sophie's face, and Chloe's expression held a weariness far beyond her years, the kind born from too much uncertainty and too many broken promises. "That's not," I began, but Mark was already pushing past me, heading for the door. "I'm leaving," he declared, his voice suddenly firm. "For good this time." "Mark, wait. Don't do this. The girls will be better off without me." He paused at the door, his hand on the knob. "You'll take care of them. You already are. They love you more than they ever loved me." "That's not true, and you know it." But he was already out the door, the screen banging shut in his wake. I heard his car engine turn over, coughing and sputtering before he sped out of the driveway. The girls and I stood frozen in the living room, listening, as the sound of his car faded into the vast, silent night. The next morning, I found the note he'd left on the kitchen counter. It was written on a piece of notebook paper, the words shaky but legible. Eleanor, I can't be the father they deserve. Every day I look at them is another day I fail Amelia's memory. Take them, raise them, love them the way I can't anymore. They're yours now. Mark. I carefully folded that note and placed it in my writing desk. A nagging instinct told me I would need it one day. Who could have known it would be 8 years later? Sitting in my kitchen now, the metallic taste of cold tea on my tongue, I understood the real reason for his return. It wasn't about fatherly love or a desire for a second chance. It was about something else entirely, something that had nothing to do with being a parent. I rose from the table, my joints creaking in protest, and took my mug to the sink. Amelia's photo watched me from the refrigerator, her young face looking serious in the fading evening light. Tomorrow would bring whatever calculated move Mark had planned, but I was prepared. I had the truth on my side, and 8 years of evidence that those girls belonged here with me, where they were cherished and safe. The sound of Chloe's laughter drifted down from upstairs as she helped Sophie with her homework. Normal sounds in a normal house, where children could depend on the adults in their lives to keep them safe. Some battles are worth fighting, no matter how long they take. The weight of that memory was heavy on my shoulders as I sat in my kitchen, my gaze fixed on Amelia's photograph. But Mark's desertion wasn't the final chapter. It was the start of my own determined search for answers. 3 weeks after he vanished, I drove to the Asheville Police Department. Officer Miller, a man who looked to be about my late daughter's age, listened with empathy as I detailed the situation. His uniform was starched and professional, but his eyes conveyed a genuine concern. "Mrs. Miller," he said, leaning forward over his standard-issue metal desk, "I understand your worry, but without any indication of foul play or that he was forced to leave, all we can do is enter his name into the National Missing Persons Database." The fluorescent lights above hummed, casting a sterile glare on the pale green walls. I felt deeply out of place in my gardening clothes, surrounded by filing cabinets and official forms that could never capture the pain of 2 little girls asking why their daddy didn't love them. "He left a note," I said, my voice quiet. "He said he couldn't cope with being their father." "That actually reinforces the idea of a voluntary departure," Officer Miller replied, his tone gentle but firm. "Adults have the right to leave, Mrs. Miller, even when we don't approve of their decisions." 2 months later, my growing frustration with the official channels led me to the office of David Chen in Hendersonville. The private investigator worked out of a small, cluttered office above a bakery, his desk a chaotic landscape of case files and coffee-stained documents. "Finding people is my specialty, Mr. Papal, Eddie T," Chen stated plainly, his expression serious. "But you need to be prepared. Sometimes, what we discover isn't what we were hoping to find." His fee was $200 a day, plus expenses a considerable amount for a retired woman living on a fixed income. But I had my savings, and the girls deserved some form of closure, even if they never knew I was looking for it. "I'll provide weekly updates," Mr. Chen promised, shaking my hand. "I'll find him, Mrs. Miller. The question is, what will you do once I have?" At that moment, I had no answer. 3 weeks later, in mid-September, Mr. Chen called with an update. Mark was living in Austin, Texas, using his mother's maiden name, and working as a bartender at a place called the Rusty Spur. He had rented a small apartment in a rundown part of the city, and had made no effort to contact anyone back home. "He's alive and seems healthy," Mr. Chen reported over the phone. "He's living from one paycheck to the next, but it's the life he's chosen. There's no indication that he's being held against his will or prevented from getting in touch." The news was a shock. A part of me had secretly hoped he was ill, trapped, or unable to come back for some reason beyond his control. The reality was that he had simply chosen a new existence that had no room for his children. "Do you want me to make contact? Arrange a meeting?" Mr. Chen asked. I sat silently in my kitchen, watching Chloe help Sophie with her social studies project at the very table where I now sat. They had adjusted to life without him. They had found their own rhythm as a small family. They still asked about their daddy from time to time, but the tears had ceased months ago. "No," I said at last. "Close the investigation." "Are you sure? I can continue to monitor his activities. If he wanted to come back, he would have—" The words came out with more force than I intended. "Send me your final report and the bill." Mr. Chen mailed me a thick manila envelope filled with photographs, addresses, and employment details. There was Mark, smiling from behind a bar. Mark, walking alone on a busy city street. Mark, living the life he had chosen over the one he had abandoned. I placed that envelope in my desk drawer, right next to his farewell note. Now, 8 years later, I finally understood why I had held on to those documents. Knowledge was a form of power, and Mark had no idea how much I knew. He thought he could just reappear with lawyers and legal threats, assuming I had been sitting here, helpless and waiting, all this time. But I had never been helpless. I had only been patient. The sound of gravel crunching outside snapped me back to the present. Through the window, I saw the school bus making its way up the drive, bringing my girls home from another ordinary day in their safe, predictable lives. Some quests end when you find what you were searching for. Others end when you realize that what you already have is far better than what was lost. The school bus came to a stop at the end of the driveway at precisely 3:45, as it did every weekday. I stood at the kitchen counter, slicing pears, the knife moving in steady, familiar strokes, while my mind was a storm of thoughts I couldn't share with the two girls walking towards the house. Chloe's laughter drifted through the screen door as she teased Sophie about something that had happened at school. The normal, happy sounds of teenagers returning to their normal life. A life Mark now intended to shatter with legal documents and courtroom battles. My hands trembled slightly as I placed the pear slices on 2 plates. How could I face them and act as if yesterday's confrontation had never occurred? How could I help Sophie with her algebra, while simultaneously trying to calculate the odds of losing them both to a man who had already shown he didn't want them? The kitchen door flew open, followed by the familiar thud of backpacks dropping to the floor. Chloe came in first, her dark, curly hair still damp from soccer practice, followed by Sophie, her fingers smudged with charcoal from art class. "Hey, Grandma," Chloe called out, already making her way to the refrigerator. "Coach thinks I have a real shot at being team captain next year, if I keep up the hard work." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." The words were automatic as I studied her face, searching for traces of Amelia but seeing Mark's stubborn jawline and expressive eyes. "Get some juice to go with these pears." Sophie came up to the counter, her 13-year-old energy brightening the room. "Look what I drew." She pulled a rolled-up piece of paper from her backpack. It was our farmhouse, rendered in vibrant charcoals, with 3 figures standing in the front yard. Eleanor, Chloe, Sophie. No one else. "It's beautiful, honey." My voice was a little thick. "We'll find a special spot for it on the fridge." As they sat at the kitchen table with their snack, I began to prepare dinner. Shepherd's pie, a comfort food that had seen us through countless homework sessions and teenage dramas. The routine task helped to steady my nerves, but I couldn't stop watching them, trying to memorize these precious, ordinary moments, just in case they were numbered. "Grandma, you're acting strange," Chloe observed. Her juice glass paused mid-air. "You keep looking at us like we're about to vanish." A flush of heat crept up my neck. "Just a bit tired, I suppose. It's been a long day." Sophie was wrestling with her math homework, eraser dust peppering the table. "I hate these equations," she complained. "Why do I even need to know this stuff?" I pulled a chair up beside her, thankful for the diversion. "Everything is built on what came before," I explained, showing her a simpler way to approach the problem. "It's like gardening. You can't have beautiful roses if you don't prepare the soil first." "You always say that," Sophie grinned, but she returned to her work with a new sense of purpose. Chloe finished her homework quickly and began to talk about the upcoming school dance. Her words were a soothing backdrop as I battled the overwhelming urge to tell her how immensely proud I was, how much I loved them both, and how I would fight tooth and nail against anyone who tried to tear them away from me. During dinner, we fell into our usual comfortable rhythm. Chloe talked about a friend whose parents were going through a messy divorce, and I had to clench my fork to keep from wincing. Sophie presented her drawing again, passionately explaining every detail. The three of us, she pointed to the figures. Our family. Our family. Not his, not mine. Ours. We had built it together, through scraped knees and late-night fevers, through soccer games and school plays. Mark had walked away from all of this, choosing late-night bars and a solitary existence over bedtime stories and Sunday morning pancakes. "Grandma, why are you so quiet tonight?" Chloe asked again, her teenage intuition sensing my unease. "Just thinking about a few things I need to handle," I said, which was true enough. "Nothing for you girls to worry about." After dinner, they went upstairs to finish their schoolwork and get ready for bed. Their voices floated down through the old house, Chloe helping Sophie with something, both of them laughing at a private joke. The sounds of sisters who had grown up side by side, protected and cherished in this house that had become their haven. I stood at the kitchen sink, washing the dishes, watching their silhouettes move past the upstairs windows. 8 years of this routine, 8 years of creating something strong and secure from the rubble Mark had left behind. How could I tell them their father had returned with the sole intention of demolishing it all? The weight of the secret felt immense as I dried the last plate and put it away. Tomorrow would bring its own set of challenges, but tonight, I would let them sleep soundly, secure in the belief that they were safe in the only home they truly remembered. Some truths are too heavy for children to bear, no matter how old they are. A week later, I was mending a section of the picket fence in the front yard, when Susan Davis's mail truck came up the driveway, nearly an hour ahead of schedule. Something in the way she drove, slower and more hesitant than usual, made me stop my work and wipe the sweat from my brow. Susan had been delivering our mail for over a decade. She knew my habits, knew I preferred she leave everything in the mailbox at the end of the drive. But today, she parked by the house and walked towards me, holding a large manila envelope that required a signature. "Morning, Eleanor." Her kind face was creased with concern. "Got some certified mail for you. Looks official." My stomach clenched as I signed the electronic pad with a hand that had been perfectly steady just moments before. The envelope was from a law firm in Charlotte, Thompson, Finch and Associates. Nothing good ever arrives in an envelope that needs a signature. "Thanks, Susan," I managed, keeping my voice even. "Probably just some paperwork for the farm." But we both knew that wasn't true. In my kitchen, I slid open the envelope with a small knife, my hands becoming steadier as cold anger began to replace my initial dread. The legal documents inside were dense and formal, filled with language designed to overwhelm someone unfamiliar with the legal system. The State of North Carolina, Family Court Division, Mark Peterson versus Eleanor Miller, regarding the unlawful retention of minors Chloe and Sophie Peterson, unlawful retention. As if loving those girls, raising them, and providing them with a stable, secure home was some kind of criminal act. As if 8 years of being their mother in every way that mattered was a crime against the man who had abandoned them like stray animals. I read the allegations 3 times, my fury growing with each pass. Mark was accusing me of preventing him from seeing his children, of custodial interference, of violating his parental rights. The man who had written a note declaring he couldn't be their father was now claiming I had stolen that opportunity from him. The phone rang precisely 10 minutes after Susan's truck had disappeared down the road. Mark's timing was impeccable, clearly calculated. He knew exactly when I would have received the papers. "Did you get them?" His voice was cold and detached, a world away from the broken man who had stumbled onto my porch all those years ago. "Mark, you have lost your mind." My grip on the phone tightened. "Unlawful retention? Those girls have been with me because you left them here. I was sick, Eleanor. I was grieving. And you took advantage of my vulnerability to steal my children." "Steal them?" The word burst out of me. "I saved them. I gave them a home when their own father decided a bar was more important than their bedtime stories. Meet me today, 3 o'clock, the corner cafe." His tone left no room for negotiation. We can either handle this privately, or we can let a judge decide. It's your choice." The line went dead before I could even reply. I stood there for a moment, staring at the silent phone before carefully placing it back in its cradle. Mark's choice of venue was strategic. The cafe was a public place, neutral ground, filled with potential witnesses. He had planned this, thought through every single detail. I looked around my kitchen, at the 8 years of family life reflected in every object. Chloe's soccer trophies lined the windowsill. Sophie's artwork was a vibrant collage on the refrigerator door. Homework was still spread across the table from the night before. This wasn't a desperate act from a father wanting his children back. This was a cold, hard calculation. Someone had been advising him, coaching him, feeding him the legal language and strategy for this assault. He was no longer the broken man who had left that note in 2017. This was someone who had taken the time to prepare, to find resources, and to orchestrate his attack. I glanced at the clock. 11:15. The girls wouldn't be home for hours, giving me plenty of time to drive into town and confront whatever Mark had in store for me at the corner cafe. As I changed into a clean blouse, I caught my reflection in the bedroom mirror. 70 years old, my face and hands weathered by years of farm work and worry, but I was still strong enough to fight for the things that truly mattered. Mark might have lawyers and legal documents on his side, but I had something far more powerful: the truth. And I had the note he had written 8 years ago, the one where he had willingly surrendered his children because he couldn't handle being their father. He had no idea I had kept it. He had no idea what kind of evidence he had left behind in his one moment of raw, desperate honesty. Let him come with his lawyers and his crocodile tears. I had been raising his children while he was off living his life. Now, he was about to find out the true cost of walking away from your family. The legal papers lay on my kitchen counter, like a formal declaration of war. Fine. If Mark wanted a war, then a war he would get. But he was about to learn that a woman fighting for her children, even if they weren't hers by birth, was more formidable than he could ever imagine. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. It was time to find out what Mark really wanted, and what I would have to do to keep my girls safe. 20 minutes later, I pulled my old pickup into the parking lot of the corner cafe, the engine ticking as it cooled in the afternoon sun. Through the large plate glass windows, I could see the familiar red vinyl booths and checkered floor, a place that had been the backdrop for countless town gatherings, birthday parties, and quiet conversations for as long as I could remember. I chose a booth near the window, giving me a clear view of both entrances, an old habit from a lifetime on the farm that served me well in situations like this. Betty Morrison, the owner, approached with her usual warm smile, but I saw the concern in her eyes as she poured me a cup of coffee without me having to ask. "Tough day, Eleanor?" she asked softly, her experienced hands steady. "It could be better, Betty," I admitted, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "But it could be a lot worse, too." Mark walked in at precisely 3:00, and for a moment, I didn't recognize him. The desperate, broken man who had stumbled onto my porch was gone. In his place was a man in a dark, tailored suit that spoke of expensive legal consultations. His hair was perfectly styled, his face clean-shaven. He moved with a practiced, deliberate confidence, scanning the cafe's patrons before sliding into the booth across from me. "You look worn out, Eleanor," he started, his voice dripping with a false sweetness that felt like venom. I imagine raising someone else's children for 8 years would be exhausting. The insult was calculated, but decades of dealing with unpredictable weather and stubborn livestock had taught me the value of patience. "They're not someone else's children, Mark. They are your children. Amelia's children. My granddaughters." "Biologically, yes," he said, stirring a packet of sugar into his coffee with slow, measured movements. "But legally, that is about to change." Betty came by to refill our cups, her movements sharp and disapproving. Everyone in a town this small knew our story. They knew how Mark had vanished, and how I had stepped in to raise Chloe and Sophie. In a community like ours, there are no secrets, only varying degrees of unspoken understanding. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries," Mark continued, leaning forward with a predatory gleam in his eyes. "I want $500,000, Eleanor. Cash. You transfer it into an account that I will provide, and I will disappear again. Permanently this time. The figure was staggering. $500,000. It was more money than most people in this town would see in a lifetime. And if I say no? Then, I take the girls. His smile was unwavering. I have witnesses ready to testify about your age, your isolation, your inability to provide a suitable environment for two growing teenagers. The courts tend to favor the biological parent, especially a father who has overcome personal tragedy to reclaim his children. I studied his face, looking past the expensive suit and confident demeanor to the raw desperation beneath. This wasn't about a father's love or a desire for a second chance. This was about money. Someone or something had him cornered, and he was using my granddaughters as his way out. Where were you when Chloe broke her arm falling out of the treehouse? I asked quietly. When Sophie had the flu so bad, she had to be hospitalized for a week? When they cried themselves to sleep asking why their daddy didn't love them anymore? I was unwell, he replied, his voice flat and emotionless. Grieving. Processing my trauma. The court will understand that I needed time to heal before I could be the father they deserved. 8 years is a long time to heal. Mark checked his watch. Another deliberate, calculated gesture. You have 48 hours to make your decision, Eleanor. The money or the children. Those are your only options. He stood up and placed a crisp $20 bill on the table, more than enough to cover both our coffees. Even his method of payment was strategic, a performance of financial stability for anyone who might be watching. Mark, I called out as he reached the door. What happened to you? Where is the man who loved Amelia? For a brief instant, his mask slipped. A flicker of something raw and broken crossed his face before the professional facade snapped back into place. He died with her, Mark said flatly. What you see now is what's left. The bell on the door chimed as he left, his footsteps echoing on the sidewalk as he walked to his sleek black sedan. I sat at the table, watching him drive away, while Betty hovered nearby, her concern palpable. Eleanor, honey, are you okay? I will be, I said, standing and leaving my own money on the table. One way or another I will be. The drive home gave me time to think. This wasn't a custody battle. It was extortion, plain and simple, dressed up in legal jargon. Mark had calculated that my love for the girls would make me desperate enough to pay any price to avoid a fight. But he had made one critical miscalculation. He assumed that I had been passive for the last 8 years, that I had simply accepted his abandonment without any preparation or documentation. But a farmer always plans for the worst, for droughts, for floods, for unexpected disasters. I had something Mark knew nothing about, something that could change the entire game. That evening, I found Chloe and Sophie sprawled on the living room sofa, bickering over the TV remote with the easy familiarity of sisters. The setting sun cast long shadows through the windows, illuminating the life we had built together. Chloe's soccer trophies gleamed on the mantle. Sophie's artwork covered an entire wall. Framed photos documented 8 years of birthdays, holidays, and simple, everyday moments that had become immeasurably precious. I took the remote and turned off the television. Both girls looked up, startled out of their routine. We need to talk, I said, sitting on the edge of the coffee table so I was facing them. Both of you. This is important. Chloe sat up immediately, her 15-year-old senses on high alert. Sophie's expression shifted from mild curiosity to deep concern as she registered the seriousness in my voice. Girls, I have to tell you something I should have told you sooner. I took a deep breath, knowing that my next words would irrevocably alter their sense of security. Your father is back, and he wants to take you away from here. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, like the air before a summer storm. Chloe's face hardened with a grim understanding, while Sophie's eyes widened with a complex mix of confusion and a flicker of hope. Dad's back? Sophie whispered. He wants to see us? He wants more than that, I explained as gently as I could. He's filed legal papers claiming that I've kept you from him against the law. He wants custody. He wants you to go and live with him. Chloe's reaction was instant and fierce. No way, she said, her voice filled with an anger I had rarely heard from her. He's the one who walked out on us, Grandma. He chose to leave. I know, sweetheart. I know exactly what happened. I took out my phone and showed them a photo I had discreetly taken of Mark at the cafe earlier that day. This is him now. Do you remember him? Sophie studied the picture intently, as if trying to connect this stranger's face to the fragmented memories of a little girl. A little. Maybe. Her voice was hesitant, a mixture of uncertainty and a deep-seated longing. He looks different. You were only 5 when he left, I reminded her softly. Chloe, you remember more. I remember him crying all the time, Chloe said, her tone flat. I remember him leaving us with you more and more. And I remember the night he packed a bag and drove away without even saying goodbye. We moved the conversation to the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared thousands of meals, worked through countless homework problems, and talked about everything big and small. The familiar setting seemed to provide a sense of stability for the difficult discussion ahead. He can't just come back and take us, Sophie said, her voice growing stronger. This is our home. You're our family. The law can be complicated, I explained. A biological parent has certain rights, even after being gone for a long time. But I need you both to know something. I will fight for you. I will fight with everything I have to keep you right here, where you belong. Chloe leaned forward, her young face set with a determination that was beyond her years. What kind of fight? Court? Lawyers? All of it. And it could get unpleasant. He might say things about me, about our life here, that are not true. Are you prepared for that? Let him try, Chloe said with a fierce loyalty that warmed my heart. Everyone in town knows what you've done for us. Everyone knows he's the one who ran away. Sophie's response was quieter, but just as firm. Grandma, can I ask you something? If he wants to see us, could we maybe meet him? Just once? But still live here with you? The innocence of her question was heartbreaking. Sophie's natural curiosity about the father she barely remembered was at war with her deep attachment to the only stable home she had ever known. We may not have a choice about meeting him, I said honestly. If this ends up in court, you might have to see him there. But where you live, who you live with, that's what we're fighting for. I'm not going anywhere, Chloe declared with absolute finality. I don't care what some judge says. This is my home. You're my family. He gave up any right to make decisions for me when he abandoned us. Sophie nodded slowly, her own decision solidifying. I want to stay too, even if I do see him, even if he's nice. I want to live here with you and Chloe. We're a family. The wave of relief that washed over me was so intense that I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. For 8 years, a part of me had worried that one day they might choose their biological father over the grandmother who had raised them. Their immediate, unwavering loyalty was the greatest gift I could have ever received. Then we'll fight this together, I promised them. The 3 of us. Whatever it takes to keep our family whole. Chloe reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We've got your back, Grandma. Just like you've always had ours. As they headed upstairs for the night, calling out their goodnights and making plans for the next day, I sat alone at our kitchen table, feeling something I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Hope. Mark had made a critical error in his strategy. He had assumed that the children who barely remembered him would be eager to embrace a father they had likely romanticized over the years. Instead, he was about to face a custody battle for 2 young women who had already firmly chosen their side. The next morning, after dropping Chloe and Sophie at school with assurances that everything would be all right, I drove into town to the offices of Laura Walsh, attorney at law. Her secretary, an efficient woman named Margaret, led me down a hallway lined with diplomas and certificates into an office that exuded an air of competence and experience. Laura Walsh was exactly what I had hoped for. A woman in her early 50s with intelligent eyes and a firm handshake that told me she was not easily intimidated. Her desk was a controlled chaos of law books, open case files, and legal pads covered in notes, the sign of a mind in constant motion. Mrs. Miller, she began, after pouring us both a cup of coffee from a well-used pot. I've had a chance to review the documents you sent over. The accusations Mr. Peterson has made are quite serious. If we lose, The court could order the immediate removal of the children from your care. The words were a cold splash of reality, but I had expected as much. Miss Walsh, what you need to understand is that every single one of his accusations is either an outright lie or a gross distortion of the truth. I have 8 years of evidence that proves those girls belong with me. Tell me everything, she said, picking up a yellow legal pad. Start from the beginning, and don't leave anything out, no matter how insignificant it might seem. For the next hour, I laid out our family's history, Amelia's battle with cancer and her death in 2017, Mark's subsequent spiral into grief and neglect, the night he abandoned the children at my house, my decision to hire a private investigator who located him in Austin, the girls' adjustment and how they had flourished under my care. His current demand for custody, I concluded, has nothing to do with being a father. He offered me a deal yesterday, $500,000 to disappear for good. This is nothing more than extortion, masquerading as parental concern. Extortion? Laura's eyebrows shot up. Did you record this conversation? No. But it happened at the corner cafe. There were witnesses. Betty Morrison served us coffee, and certainly heard parts of it. That's helpful. But it's his word against yours, Laura said, tapping her pen against her lips in thought. What we really need is concrete evidence of his abandonment. Letters, emails, anything that proves he voluntarily gave up custody. I reached into my purse and pulled out the carefully preserved piece of paper I had carried with me for 8 long years. Would this help? Laura unfolded the note, her expression shifting from professional interest to intense focus as she read. Mark's handwriting was shaky but clear. Eleanor, I can't be the father they deserve. Every day I look at them is another day I fail Amelia's memory. Take them, raise them, love them the way I can't anymore. They're yours now. Mark, my word, Laura breathed, placing the note carefully on her desk. Mrs. Miller, this could be the cornerstone of our entire defense. This is a clear statement of voluntary abandonment, in the biological father's own handwriting. Where did you get this? He left it on my kitchen counter, the morning after he packed his bags, and drove away 8 years ago. I watched as Laura examined the paper, hope building within me, as I saw her professional assessment take shape. I kept it because, well, I think a part of me always knew this day might come, and maybe I just couldn't bring myself to throw away the last honest thing he ever said to me. Has anyone else seen this note? No one. Not even the girls know it exists. Laura made several more notes, her energy visibly increasing as she processed the legal ramifications. This changes everything, Mrs. Miller. With this note, combined with witness testimony about his 8-year absence and the children's clear desire to stay with you, we have a very strong case. What's our next step? First, we need character witnesses from your community, teachers, neighbors, anyone who can attest to your care of the children and Mark's absence. Second, we will formally document the children's wishes. At 13 and 15, their preferences hold significant weight in court. And this note, she gestured to the paper, we'll have a handwriting expert authenticate it and submit it as evidence. Unless Mark can somehow prove it's a forgery, which is impossible, this demonstrates a clear and voluntary relinquishment of his parental responsibilities. For the first time since Mark had reappeared in my driveway, I felt a genuine sense of hope that we could win. Laura's confidence was contagious, her strategy was sound, and her experience was evident in every question she asked. There's one more thing, Laura said, leaning forward. Mark's attorney will undoubtedly try to portray you as an elderly woman who is unable to properly care for 2 teenagers. We need to be prepared to demonstrate your physical health, your mental sharpness, and your ongoing ability to be their guardian. I can handle that, I said. 70 isn't so old when you've spent your life working a farm. Excellent. Laura stood and extended her hand. Mrs. Miller, I'm going to do everything in my power to keep your family together. Mark Peterson made a choice 8 years ago, and he put it in writing. Now, he's going to have to face the consequences. Walking out of Laura's office into the bright morning sun, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. True optimism. Mark might have his lawyers and his calculated strategy, but I had something far more powerful. The truth. documented in his own handwriting. He had no idea what was about to hit him. The week leading up to the court hearing was a whirlwind of methodical, purposeful preparation that reminded me of harvest time, where the outcome of an entire season's work hangs in the balance. Laura had given me a list of potential witnesses to contact, people who could speak to my character and the girls' well-being under my roof. My first visit was to Mr. Frank Collins. At 75, my next-door neighbor had been a constant presence, watching Chloe and Sophie transform from scared little girls into confident young women. He welcomed me into his kitchen with a cup of hot tea and a plate of shortbread cookies. "Eleanor, I've been expecting this conversation for 8 years," he said, settling into his armchair by the window that looked out over my property. "I've watched you be both a father and a mother to those girls. I saw you at every school play, every soccer game, every single time they were sick or needed you." His voice gained strength as he continued. "When Sophie had that bad case of pneumonia, you sat up with her for 3 nights straight. When Chloe broke her arm, you were at the hospital before the ambulance even arrived. That man?" He shook his head with conviction. "He was a ghost long before he actually disappeared." Next, I drove to the local middle school to meet with Mrs. Brenda Garcia, who had taught both girls and witnessed their growth despite the trauma of their early years. Her office walls were a testament to her dedication, covered with student artwork and academic awards, several of which bore the Peterson name. "Your granddaughters are exceptional young women," she told me, pulling their files from a cabinet. "When they first came to live with you, Chloe was withdrawn and often acted out. Sophie had nightmares that made it hard for her to concentrate in class. But look at these records." She spread them out on her desk. "Steady improvement, honor roll, excellent social skills." She leaned forward, her teacher's insight shining through. "Eleanor, I've worked with many children from difficult situations. These girls aren't broken. They are thriving because you gave them exactly what they needed: stability, consistency, and unconditional love." Dr. Evans at the family clinic provided 8 years of medical records, a thick file documenting my responsible guardianship, regular checkups, prompt treatment for illnesses, dental appointments, vaccinations, all the mundane but crucial details of raising children that Mark had left behind. "Mrs. Miller," Dr. Evans said, looking over the files, "these children have received exemplary care under your guardianship. Their physical and emotional development has been not just normal, but outstanding, especially considering what they went through." As I made my rounds through town, however, I started noticing unfamiliar cars parked at the local in-cars with city license plates, carrying people in business suits who were clearly not tourists. Mark was bringing in his own witnesses, preparing his own version of our history for the courtroom. That evening, Laura called to confirm the court date. 9 o'clock sharp tomorrow morning, she said. "Are you ready for this, Eleanor?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, my hand resting on the envelope in my jacket pocket, the note from Mark that I believed would end this fight once and for all. "Laura, do you really think the note will be enough, combined with everything else? Your community's support, the children's wishes, 8 years of documented care." Her voice was a reassuring blend of professional confidence and personal conviction. "Eleanor, the truth has power. Tomorrow, we are going to prove that love and sacrifice mean more than biology and legal maneuvers." After hanging up, I walked through my quiet house, the evidence of our family life all around me. Chloe's soccer cleats by the back door, Sophie's latest drawing on the refrigerator, school photos on the mantelpiece, documenting their journey from frightened little girls to the remarkable teenagers they had become. Tomorrow, I would walk into that courtroom with 8 years of proof that a home is not defined by bloodlines. It is defined by who shows up, day after day, no matter how difficult things get. Mark had chosen to run. I had chosen to stay. Now, a judge would decide which choice had better served the children. The familiar smiling face of Amelia in the photo on the mantel seemed to watch over me as I turned off the lights. I had kept my promise to her. Whatever tomorrow held, I had fought for her girls with everything I had. The Asheville County Courthouse was an imposing limestone structure on Main Street, its facade weathered by a century of Carolina storms. yet still projecting an unwavering sense of authority. Laura and I arrived 15 minutes early, ascending the grand steps past a small but vocal group of my supporters from the community. Their presence was a comforting reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. Inside, the courtroom's polished wooden benches quickly filled with familiar faces. Betty Morrison from the cafe, Mr. Collins from next door, Mrs. Garcia from the school, Dr. Evans. People who had witnessed my journey of raising Chloe and Sophie, who knew the truth of our lives. Mark entered at precisely 9:00, accompanied by a man in an expensive suit, his lawyer from Charlotte, oozing city confidence. Mark had chosen his attire with care. A conservative dark suit, a muted tie, the very picture of a responsible father. But I could see the rigid tension in his shoulders and the way his eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine. Judge Evelyn Reed entered, her presence commanding immediate respect. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and a reputation for being fair but firm, not one to be swayed by emotion over evidence. "Court is now in session," she announced, her voice resonating with the authority of decades on the bench. Case number 2025 FC 147, Peterson versus Miller, regarding the custody of the minor children, Chloe and Sophie Peterson. Mark's attorney, a man named Thompson, who clearly billed by the hour, rose to deliver his opening statement. His voice was smooth and persuasive, the voice of a man accustomed to winning through presentation, not necessarily facts. "Your Honor, this case is about a father's fundamental right to his children. My client, Mark Peterson, suffered a debilitating mental health crisis following the tragic death of his wife. During this period of profound grief, the defendant, his mother-in-law, took advantage of the situation and unlawfully prevented him from maintaining a relationship with his biological children." I felt Laura's hand gently touch my arm, a silent gesture of support as Thompson continued to weave his fictional narrative. "Mr. Peterson has since undergone extensive therapy, has maintained stable employment, and has rebuilt his life. He now seeks to reclaim his rightful role as a father to the children who have been unjustly denied his love." When Mark took the witness stand, his performance was masterful. He spoke of overwhelming grief, of needing time to heal, before he could be the father his girls deserved. His voice cracked at just the right moments, his eyes welled with tears that would have seemed genuine to anyone who hadn't lived through his abandonment. "I never intended to be gone permanently," he testified, looking directly at Judge Reed with practiced sincerity. "I was seeking treatment, working to become the parent Chloe and Sophie needed. Mrs. Miller refused all my attempts to contact them, claiming she was protecting the children from my fragile state. The lies flowed so effortlessly, I was almost impressed." His imported witnesses followed, one by one. A therapist from Austin, who had seen him a handful of times, a former supervisor who vouched for his work ethic, a neighbor who claimed Mark often spoke lovingly of the children he'd left behind. It was all carefully coached testimony from people with limited knowledge, designed to construct an image of rehabilitation and paternal devotion. Laura's cross-examination was sharp and precise, exposing the shallow nature of these relationships and the limited timeframes they represented. But Thompson had done his job well, creating a sliver of reasonable doubt about the nature of Mark's absence, while painting me as an aging grandmother who had overstepped her boundaries. During the lunch recess, Laura and I stepped outside into the fresh air, where my supporters had gathered. Their unwavering presence was a powerful reminder that the truth had witnesses too, not polished professionals from the city, but real people who had watched me raise two girls with love and sacrifice. "How do you think it's going?" I asked Laura as we walked back towards the courthouse. "He's good," she admitted. "Well, coached, prepared, playing the victim card perfectly." Then she smiled with a quiet confidence. "But Eleanor, he has absolutely no idea what's coming this afternoon." I touched the envelope in my jacket pocket, feeling the weight of 8 years of truth captured in Mark's own handwriting. Let him perform. Let him cry his practiced tears and talk of rights and recovery. I had something far more powerful than his polished lies. I had the truth, preserved in his own desperate hand from the night he chose to run instead of fight for his children. When court reconvened at 2, 0. I walked to the witness stand with the same steady resolve that had carried me through 8 years of raising 2 girls on my own. The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted. There was a palpable sense of anticipation, as if everyone knew we were approaching the moment of truth. Laura approached the witness box, her questions designed to allow me to tell our story in my own words. Mrs. Miller, please describe for the court your relationship with Chloe and Sophie over the past 8 years. I looked out at the packed room, at the faces of the people who had watched me become a parent for the second time in my life. Your Honor, those girls are my daughters in every way that counts. I have been to every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, every school play. I have stayed up all night with them when they were sick, helped them with their homework, and taught them how to drive. I didn't choose this responsibility. It chose me. On the night their father walked away, Mark's attorney objected, but Judge Reed allowed me to continue. When Chloe broke her arm, I was the one who rushed her to the emergency room. When Sophie had nightmares about why her daddy didn't love her anymore, I was the one who held her until she fell back asleep. For 8 years, Your Honor, I have been the parent who showed up. Laura nodded, moving towards the crucial point. Mrs. Miller, you heard testimony that you prevented Mr. Peterson from contacting his children. Is that true? No, ma'am, it is not. I reached into my jacket pocket, my hand closing around the envelope that had been waiting for this moment for 8 years. Your Honor, if I may, I have something that might clarify exactly why Mr. Peterson had no contact with his children. Judge Reed leaned forward, her attention focused. What is this evidence, Mrs. Miller? A note, Your Honor, written by Mark Peterson himself on the night he abandoned Chloe and Sophie. I held up the aged envelope, its edges softened from years in my desk. He left this on my kitchen counter, along with 2 sleeping children who woke up the next morning and asked me where their daddy had gone. A hush fell over the courtroom. I could see Mark's face. It had gone ashen. His eyes were locked on the envelope, a forgotten relic of his past. His attorney was on his feet in an instant. Objection, Your Honor. This supposed document has not been authenticated. I'll allow it, Judge Reed said firmly. Mrs. Miller, may I see this evidence? I walked to the bench and handed her the envelope. I watched her carefully remove the handwritten note. Her expression remained impassive, but I saw her eyes widen slightly as she read Mark's words. Mr. Peterson, the judge said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. Do you recognize this handwriting? Mark's carefully constructed composure was crumbling. Your Honor, I was not in my right mind when I wrote that. I was grieving. I was ill. I wasn't responsible for. Mr. Peterson, please answer the question. Is this your handwriting? Yes, but... Judge Reed held up a hand for silence and then read the note aloud for the court record. Eleanor, I can't be the father they deserve. Every day I look at them is another day I fail Amelia's memory. Take them. Raise them. Love them the way I can't anymore. They're yours now. Mark? The courtroom erupted in hushed whispers. Mark was on his feet, tears streaming down his face, but these were not the calculated tears from his earlier performance. These were the raw, desperate sobs of a man watching 8 years of lies implode. Your Honor, I was sick. That note doesn't represent how I truly feel. I've changed. I've grown. I deserve another chance. But Judge Reed was studying the note with the methodical gaze of someone who had spent a career separating truth from fabrication. Mr. Peterson, she said quietly, this note, in your own handwriting, constitutes a voluntary abandonment of your parental rights. You did not temporarily step away to seek treatment. You permanently relinquished your custody to Mrs. Miller. The fact that you now regret that decision does not negate its legal standing. Thompson made a few desperate arguments about temporary incapacity and mental distress, but the damage was irreversible. The note was authentic. The abandonment was voluntary. And the 8 years of silence that followed spoke volumes more than any coach testimony ever could. When Judge Reed delivered her ruling 20 minutes later, her words were clear and final. The court finds that Mr. Peterson voluntarily abandoned his parental rights, as evidenced by a written declaration and an 8-year absence from his children's lives. Mrs. Eleanor Miller will retain full and sole legal and physical custody of Chloe and Sophie Peterson. No visitation rights will be granted to the biological father at this time. As the courtroom slowly emptied, I sat for a moment, watching Mark leave with his defeated attorney. A small part of me felt a pang of pity for him, a broken man who had never truly recovered from losing the love of his life. But a much larger part of me felt the profound satisfaction of justice finally served. Laura gathered her files, a look of professional pride on her face. "Eleanor, that note was everything. Why did you hold on to it for all those years?" I considered her question as we walked towards the courthouse steps, where my community was waiting. "Maybe I always knew this day would come," I said. "Or maybe I just couldn't bring myself to throw away the last honest thing he ever said to me." Outside, Chloe and Sophie were waiting with Mr. Collins and our other supporters. They had been excused from school to hear the verdict, and the relief on their faces was the only victory I had ever needed. "Grandma," Chloe said, her 15-year-old voice steady, with a maturity far beyond her years. "Is it over?" "It's over," I confirmed, wrapping my arms around both of my girls. "We're going home. We're staying together. We're a family." As we walked down the courthouse steps toward my truck, Sophie looked up at me, her eyes filled with the kind of trust that 8 years of unconditional love had built. "Grandma, did our dad really not want us?" It was the one question I had always dreaded, but the answer came easily, because it was the truth. "Your dad was hurting, honey. Sometimes, when people are in that much pain, they can't see past it to love what's right in front of them. But that was his choice, not your fault. It was never, ever your fault." The drive home took us past fields where the corn was just beginning to sprout. New life pushing up from the dark, rich soil, tended by hands that understood the patience required for growth. Just like raising children, I thought. Just like building a family from love and commitment, not from biology and obligation. Some battles are worth fighting, some promises are worth keeping, and some families are worth everything.